What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TW Motorsports, and today we are back on the Trans Am. So what are we going to do today? I'm not really sure, to be real honest with you. It's going to depend on what parts come in, but I'm hoping to get these manifolds back off and the new gaskets in place with the new bolts. I'm thinking the bolts will be here today. What else? Waiting on some coil pack, some new bolts for the coil packs, because I don't know if you guys know, but the ones that bolt these on from the factory, they have these, like, you see these heads on them? They're similar to this, like right here. And I just don't like those. So I ordered some new of those, and I'm hoping to get to that. But I just got the oil pan gasket in. And like I said, chances are there's nothing wrong with the old one, but because I took it off, I'm going to be using a new one. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this pan out really good, because as you guys know, I did drill and tap this thing. And so I just want to make sure I get all the metal shavings out, and then we are going to reassemble it with the baffle that came in it and get it into place. I think that's the first thing I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scrape. I won't show you guys this, but there's some stuff, silicone, that you have to put in the corners of these pans just to keep it from leaking. So I'm going to scrape off that, and then once we get that out of the way, we can go ahead and get our oil pan all ready to go back on, which we need because I want to hook up the lines for the turbos. So let's get that started. At this point, we've got the pan all cleaned out. I put the baffle in place. These 10 millimeters, guys, I torqued them to 106 inch-pounds. Very light. Don't put a ton on those. I also have the new pan gasket in place, and then I've started all the bolts, as you can see, because they thread in and hold quite nicely. So you don't have to reuse the rivets if you don't want to. I generally do not reuse rivets. It's just more of a hassle if you ever have to change it, to have to drill out those rivets, and then you put a bunch of crap in the pan. So I don't use them. Now, the other thing I did go ahead and do was I put a bead of silicone here where the block meets the front timing cover. That's what I had scraped off. I did that in all four corners here. So at this point, we just need to put this back in place because I never took anything else off. We're going to put it back in place, and then we'll start torquing down those oil pan bolts. Now I've got the pan in place, and a couple things you want to make sure of before you start to tighten things up is you want to make sure that it's flush with the back of the block here. So you can see that I'm flush right here in this section. So we're good there, and you need to also make sure that is the same way on the other side. So you don't want it to stick out past the block. Otherwise, you're going to have issues with cracking the pan when you're drawing the transmission on. So make sure that you do that. Now we can go ahead and torque these. Guys, what I like to do is I'll start here and kind of work my way from the middle and then alternate to the other side and kind of crisscross until I get to the front and the very back. 18 foot-pounds are what goes on these shorter ones. Now the long ones in the very, very back here, those only go to 106 inch-pounds. So don't get crazy there, but we can go ahead and start torquing these things down at this point. I've got everything torqued down now, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the oil level sensor in place. And guys, I just tighten this by hand with, well, I say by hand, I actually use a, like an adjustable end wrench to get that thing back in where it goes. You could almost do it by hand, but I just give it a little bit with adjustable end wrench. So got everything torqued, like I said. The next thing I'm going to do is, for now, I'm going to tape these off just so I can keep everything out of the engine. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the oil plug. I don't know where I actually put it. It's been a while since I had it in, and get it in there as well, just so no debris gets inside the engine, you know, and causes us any issues. Well, it's been about a week since I've been out here actually working on this, and I'll tell you guys a couple things that I didn't probably show you so far. And one of them is I messed up. I stripped out one of the oil feed bolts, and that's this guy here. I just got it a little too tight, and there's no real torque spec on it, but this is aluminum, and so you can see here where I stripped it out. John, without question, sent me 2 new ones just so I can screw 2 up now. I'm telling you guys, this guy is amazing. If you are looking to buy a turbo kit, John is by far the way to go. Just been awesome. Another thing that I screwed up If you notice here, I have two of these feeds. The instructions say to tap and thread the original feed or block off plate that went on the side of the oil pan. Well, what I did was I threaded it down too far. And so when you do that, this thing never tightens up. So what I ended up doing was I trimmed this much off of it, not a lot, and that was able to get me to tighten it up, and then I put some thread sealant on it. So that is what you need to do there. I had bought this in the meantime because I thought this would work, but the way this tilts, you'll see once we hook up the oil line, it makes a little more sense. So this really wouldn't work. It put it at an awkward angle, and so I'd just rather follow the kit instructions. So if you screw that up, don't tap too far down. What you need to do is tap it a little ways and then test fit this, and keep going until you get it to where it needs to be. Anyway, that's that. Got a new bolt for the stripped out bolt, but I think what we're going to be working on right now is I got some new bolts from ICT Billet, and the reason I got these is I don't like the heads on the factory coil packs, but I'm gonna go ahead and put the coil packs on. I'm just trying to clean up, you know, some of the stuff that's on the table. As you can see, I also got some ARP bolts for the headers or the manifolds here. So with that and the new gaskets, we can go ahead and cinch those down and torque them. Now, if you're doing this in the car, you're not really supposed to torque these down yet, but because of the way I'm doing this, I'm not gonna have to make any adjustments or try to hook anything up that would be really odd. So just so you guys know. And then I got some spark plug wire protectors. I've got some new O2 sensors for the front, and yeah, anyway, let's get to putting these on. I'm excited to put these new bolts in. Not only are they going to look nicer, but they're not going to like poke you like these do. So it comes with the replacements for this and this, as well as what bolts it to the actual engine. So we're gonna go ahead and get those in place next. So I've got these on, and you can see there's two actual sizes here. There's a shorter one and a longer one. The shorter ones go in the actual bracket. The longer ones go in the coil packs themselves. So at this point, now that I've got this all bolted down, I've got one left to put it here, but I'm going to take these out one by one and then cinch them down with the new bolts. And yeah, it's going to look a lot better. And like I said, it's not going to have these edges to poke you anytime you want to, you know, work under the hood, change the plugs or whatnot. These things just scratch up against your knuckles and arms and stuff. I really don't know the understanding behind this. You know, I would think that there would be something that pushed onto those, like a clip, a wiring loom, but that's not the case on these cars. So not really sure. Anyway, let's get these swapped out, and then we'll move on. Now that we've got everything cinched down, definitely looks better. I'm gonna go ahead and put the other oil line on. So I'm gonna leave the wrapper on this side just because I'm not ready to tie it into the oil pan yet. But I will tell you guys that there's a natural bend to this. And so what I'm going to do is it has to go from that turbo on the other side under the oil pan, and then it comes in here. So if you'll try to mimic that, facing it like this with the bend that it naturally has does not really make sense because it kind of wants to kink. So I'm going to mount it the opposite way, and that seems to make the most sense. And so what I'm saying is essentially try to put it where it's going to be and then route it to where it needs to be. And you can obviously bolt it on two different ways. Just make sure that it makes sense in the way you're routing it. So it's going to go in that dip in the pan underneath there. That's why it has this protective coating on it to keep things from getting screwed up. But let's go ahead and put that there, and then we'll kind of route it and just set it over here for now. I think I'm going to wait until I have my son out here to help me hold these to put the new gaskets in, as far as the manifold gaskets and the new bolts. But we can go ahead and get this on. So just like we did on the other side, you've got the copper washer, the actual line, another copper washer, and then the bolt. And then guys, don't do like I did and over tighten it. It's just a 9/16, and I've got it kind of in the area that I want it. I want it to try to be straight, and the center cartridge is loose, as you can see, so I could roll this down to get it started. Push your line through, roll it around, get it started, and then once we get it snug down, then we can worry about positioning this where it needs to be. So now I've got my son out here to help me, but what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have him hold the manifolds here while I replace the bolts and the gaskets. Like I said, I replaced these gaskets when I originally put this thing together, but because they've been, I mean, the motor hasn't cycled, but I feel better if I replace them so I don't have any leaks or any issues there. So I'm gonna take these 10 millimeters out. We're gonna use those new ARP bolts with the washers that I've got here, and they are 12 point. So make sure you have a 10 millimeter 12 point, but they are also 10 millimeter, just like the factory ones. So we're gonna get this out of the way and put the new gasket in and put it back on. Looking at these, they have a manifold side and a down. So obviously that's the direction that they go. I'm telling you, having help doing this is so much easier than trying to do it on your own. Make sure you put your washers in with that chafer pointed the correct direction, which mine is pointing out. Let it down just a little, there you go. We'll get a couple started. And then we'll worry about cinching them down here in a minute. And guys, if they start to fight you, don't cross thread these because it is a pain. So now we got that one on. We're gonna go to the other side and do that, and then I'll come back and talk about what torque specs we need to go to. Now that we got those new bolts and gaskets in place, we're gonna go ahead and torque these. So we're just gonna use the GM spec on this. So that is 11 the first pass, and then 18 on a second pass, starting in the middle and working our way out. So we'll go here, here, then here, here, and then here, and last back here in the back. So start in the middle, work your way out towards the outside. But 11 foot-pounds the first pass, 18 the second pass. Now that we got the manifolds tight, I'm gonna go ahead and put the drain lines on for the turbo. So you guys know that we still have this loose, okay? And I have the actual 13 millimeters on the turbos loose. Depending on which turbos you went with, like I said, mine are the 62, 66s. If you went with the other ones, there's a, like an adjustment sleeve where you can just tighten it on one side. Well, mine has 13 millimeters all the way around. So my main concern, and I sent John a message about this, and he replied immediately back to me, but my main concern was how much deviation is there between which way obviously we want our drain coming out the bottom, right? But I didn't know, from the pictures it's hard to tell exactly, you know, is it tilted more towards the motor, is it tilted away from the motor? And so I asked him, and he said you can have up to 15 degrees of deviation from straight down. And so that's perfect, because I was wondering if I was gonna have to trim the drain line in order to make that work. So I'm not gonna have to, but he supplies not only the drain lines, which are hard rubber lines, which is awesome, and then actual worm clamps that fit. You know, they're not, you know, huge. So there's some research done in this kit, that is for sure. But I'm gonna go ahead and put this in place, and then we'll get the turbo kind of where it needs to line up with the other one, and then we'll go ahead and cinch down those 13s. To me, that's the easier way to do it. And then obviously making sure that your drain line's not facing the block or facing out. We wanna make it face down, as close to straight down as possible. See, I've got it hooked up here and tight. Same thing here that comes out of the center cartridge. I've got it tight. And man, I tell you what this engineering, I would hate to be the guy that made this kit, because I don't know. This stuff is such a close fit, and he did such a great job. I did go ahead and torque these 13s down, or tighten them down anyway. I just snugged them up. Don't get real crazy there. Like I said, if you have the other turbos, there's a single adjustment. So like almost similar to a clamp like this, where you just have an adjustment on one side. But because I went with these turbos, there's a 13 millimeter all the way around. Had to get a little short wrench to get up at this top one, but that gave me the ability to kind of move this around and get it right where I wanted it in order for the drain lines to fit. So the feed lines, you know, you have a little more leeway with those. Of course, the feed line needs to come in from the top, and this needs to face as close to the bottom as possible, and it's actually tilted maybe 10 degrees towards the engine, which is what made this fit the best in my opinion. So we'll go to the other side. I'll go ahead and just do it, and then I'll show you once I finish it up. And then I'm hoping to maybe put the feed lines in place. I know it says differently in the kit, but in my opinion, it will be easier to attach them to that piece that goes on the block and then attach that piece to the block, as opposed to trying to maneuver those lines up around the engine block, in my opinion. So maybe with the engine in the car, it might be different. I wouldn't think so. It would be a hassle. I think this is the easiest way to install this kit, is on a stand. But let's go ahead and do the other drain line, and then I'll show you what it looks like. We'll move on to the feed lines. We now have the other drain line hooked up. You can see it tightened up here, and this one's a little longer, comes out, and the turbo is clocked a little more towards the outside of the car in order to make this fitment right. So you don't want this to pinch. So when you're adjusting it, make sure that you're not pinching any areas, and you should be good. I went ahead also here and tightened up these 13s, and we're good to move on to the feed line, I believe. I think this one on this side, the longer one, goes under the pan, the spot here in the pan, and then of course to the other side. I'm trying to decide from the pictures whether I want to go above or below the feed line. I would preferably like to go above it, because that would just kind of help suspend it, but we'll take a look at what the pictures look like in the book and see exactly which method that we should do. The other thing, like I said, I'm going to try to hook it up with the piece off the block, or off the oil pan. That way it's a little easier for me to tighten it up, and once I get it tight, then hopefully we can put it up into place and bolt it to the oil pan. So it's kind of hard to see that thing down there, but you can see the adapter that we hooked to the block. 80 inch-pounds is what these go to into the oil pan. So what I did was I tightened this up with it not hooked to the truck or to the block, and then put this up against it, went ahead and threaded the bolts in with a new gasket. Make sure you get a new gasket. I'll put that in the description down below. And then once I got it snug down, I went ahead and ran this other line, and I did go above the feed or the drain line on both sides. So we should be good now once I torque this to 80 inch-pounds, and we'll just keep moving on. I'm gonna go ahead and put the motor mounts on using the stock hardware. Now remember, you do have to take off the original clamshell, and you have to run these from BMR. They're like the stand style. But if you notice, they're different. This one is, the bar is quite a bit further down. That is the passenger side. The driver's side is the one closer to the top. So I got some clarification from John on that, because the instructions, they really don't show. I mean, you might be able to zoom in and get some closer pictures and figure it out, but just want to let you guys know, I am, like I said, going to be using the stock hardware. So we're going to go ahead and put those on the block. Now that we've got these attached to the block on the specific sides, we need to go ahead, like I said, I use the factory hardware here, and torque it down to factory specs, which is 37 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque these up to 37 on both sides. Got those torqued down. We need to put the line that goes in between the wastegate and the compressor housing here. So you can see there's an opening here. This copper piece needs to connect to this guy. Now you have two different sizes, obviously. One, the passenger side one is going to be a little longer than the driver's side one. This one right here, I'm going to put, it's going to kind of go, this is actually the one for the other side, but because it's a weird routing angle, I may end up moving that. I'm going to go ahead and clamp it on. It comes with clamps, and they're just spring-loaded clamps. I'm going to go ahead and put those on both sides. This one is kind of out of the way, so it's going to go underneath and back to the back. But that one on the other side, I have a feeling may cause some interference. Maybe not. I may have to heat wrap it in order to, I don't know. We'll just have to see when we get it in the car, kind of where it's going to lay. We don't want it laying up against this, but we'll just have to see. I'm going to go ahead and put it on though, and then we can always move it around once we get it, you know, situated in the car. You can see what I'm talking about, how I may have to tuck this in, just depending on where it's at. It may be under the car far enough where it won't matter, but may have to move that one. This one though, You can see it comes out from the bottom side here and then snakes around to the front. So I think we're gonna be good with that one. I don't think we're gonna have a problem at all. The other thing, guys, is I'm sure that you're wondering, like, what are you gonna do as far as the wiring? Because a lot of the instructions I'm skipping over as far as the wiring goes. Well, I'm gonna pull the wiring harness back out of the car and then route it in place so we can drop it in as all, basically all as one unit. So once I get it all finished up as far as on the engine stand here, then I'm gonna use my little plate, I'm gonna set it on the K-member over here. And then once we get it on the K-member, we can go ahead and put the intake on. I'm gonna put the transmission on. I'm gonna put the transmission dipstick, the oil dipstick, everything that goes on this engine, I'm gonna put on, and we're just gonna roll it under as one unit is what I'm hoping to do. So that's why I'm doing this the way I'm doing it. Like I said, I'm not really going by the instructions because the instructions are if the motor was in the car. And to me, this would fight you in the car. I think it would be a longer process. Now, of course, I'm taking quite a while, but at this point, I think I'm gonna go ahead. I've got 2 new O2 sensors, so I'm gonna go ahead and put those into place. Generally, it's just a 7/8, and I did buy NTKs, which are made by NGK, either way. So I'm gonna go ahead and put those in place. I will list those in the description as well, but this one's a little harder to get to. It's actually on the bottom side, kind of wrapped around the bottom, but we can just leave those pigtails out for when we get the harness over. Now that we got the O2 sensors in, you can see them here. I went ahead and put the dipstick in. It goes in the factory location and it actually fits. It's close, but it's not touching anywhere. So went ahead and got it in. And what else here? I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just start assembling just random stuff. So I've got the AC compressor here. I've got some plugs in it just because this will leak some oil, and I'm gonna buy some new gaskets here before I put the lines back on. But I can go ahead and bolt it in place, and I can go ahead and put the belt on for the AC as well. So I'm just gonna kind of randomly put some stuff back together and you know, just kind of work my way through this because I'm really at a point where I'm waiting, like I said, on a few parts, but I've got some more stuff to cut, and I don't want to get into that today. So let's just keep plugging away at putting little manual parts on here. And then I still need to get a new alternator. I actually robbed the alternator off this back when I had the B4C, the cop car, to put on here. So I need to get a new alternator. I'd like to get a little bigger one this time. But let's get this on, and then we'll just kind of go from there. Now that we have the AC on, we're ready to, I'm just gonna grab some wires and start tightening stuff up. In the instructions, it shows to mount this ground that goes on the side of the engine block. It says to mount it a certain direction. So you'll see that in the pictures. I'll show you once I get it done. But because I'm gonna have to cut this off before I put this through there, we need to cut this little tab off that is on the starter feed. And I did rewrap this all in new loom because it looked really trashy, and probably should have waited till it was in the car, but I figured I wasn't doing anything else. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim that tab off, and we'll mount that in that hole, and it's kind of up here behind the turbo, but you'll still be able to get to it. We'll get that in place, and I'll kind of show you how I routed things. So you can see how I have this face just like in the picture. I'm not really sure on the trigger or the power wire for the starter. I don't know if I'm gonna go behind the dipstick tube or in front of it. So what I did was I grabbed my starter, which you're gonna have to have the starter that he supplies. And I'm sure that he'll list that in all the parts that you need, but we need to disassemble a piece of it because I tried to put this up in there without even reading the instructions, and then realized that he provides a billet spacer in order to make this work. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna take this apart real quick and see if we can get this new spacer that's provided with the kit lined up. So just so you know, it is kind of a pain to take off. This is the old one, and I've got the new one just setting here. So I used a rubber mallet just to tap on this lightly. Don't get crazy here, guys. And you'll tap this one out. And if the center comes out, it's not a big deal. Just line the splines back up and put it back in place. But at this point, we're ready to bolt this thing down, and then I'll show you which way it's actually oriented. It can actually only go one way. I don't know why I was thinking that, but and you'll notice when you go to put it together what I'm talking about, but there's a recessed portion because you can't get to the other side here. So there's only one way it's going to go together. Now, I will tell you guys that I'm not real comfortable with the way these are threading in. So I'm going to buy a thread chaser. And once I get that, I don't even know what size it is. I'm going to go test it and see. I'll let you guys know. I think it's a good idea to chase it. They were just a little snug for me. And being that this is, you know, a piece of aluminum, I just don't want to risk screwing up the threads. So what I will do is I will re-chase the threads just to make sure we're all good, and then we'll put it together. The tap I actually used was 1/4 by 28. So just know that you guys, everything on this thing is metric, but this is not metric. And I guess, you know, MSD, I believe, is made in the USA. And so maybe they're using standard, which is kind of crazy. But anyway, I ran this down from the other side. So you want to put this up the way it's going to go. And then, like I said, I just did this to clean up the threads, and then it went in perfect. So don't get crazy either here, guys, because this is aluminum. So if you over tighten it, you will strip it. Just get them snug and it's cinched down perfectly. So at this point, we're ready to move on. And I figured I'd go ahead and put the spark plugs in. And what I'm going with here to start with, I talked to John and he said that he recommends the BR7EF from NGK. So I'm just going to put these with the gap that they come out of the box. I'm going to check them to make sure that they're all uniform, you know, but other than that, I'm going to go ahead and put those on, and then I can put my plug wires in place. It's really nice, honestly, to bring the motor out from the bottom because you can pretty much assemble it. I'm going to pull the harness out of the car at some point and hook it all up. And then we're going to roll it all in as one unit. I just think it'd be a little bit easier on me, and instead of trying to snake the wires around what I already have. So let's go ahead and get the plugs in, and then I'll put the plug wires on as well. And I did get some boots for those, so we're going to try those out. One of the things we'll get to see here also is, like, you know, what the plug or what it's going to be like putting plugs in, you know, because at times turbo cars, as you know, need plugs. And so, you know, this one's kind of a pain to reach, but I really think the way he's designed this, I don't think we're going to have any trouble. It looks like we're going to have plenty of clearance. I just do this by feel. There is a torque spec on them, but I never use that. I literally just go snug. You don't want to get over tightened because you don't want to have to helicoil one of these, but man, there is not much gap on these things. Maybe 25 thousandths at the most, which, you know, you don't want it to blow it out. So chances are that's probably right, but we're gonna keep going, get them all in. So I've got the factory protectors, and I don't know if I'm gonna use them or not with the boots. I'm not even really sure that I need these heat shields because it actually looks like there's plenty of clearance. I might just be able to use the factory. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the factory boots instead of using these heat shields, and we'll see how I like it. If I don't, I could always go back and put these on. I could use both, I guess, but to me, this just looks like it's going to fit nice. I mean, there's really quite a bit of clearance between the two here. We'll see as we go around, but I don't know. It may not be necessary. I used to always get mad when cars would drive by because you can hear these things click on, and I'd be changing spark plugs or wires, and somebody drive by, I couldn't hear it click, so I'd take it off and put it back on. It always made me crazy, especially when I was working outside, but I think we're good. We'll get these in place, and we'll just kind of see, you know, how close they are to the manifold. And, you know, we may end up using these, we may not. I have to say, guys, it fits really nice. It's not touching anywhere. I think that'll help keep some of the heat down. I don't know. You know, there's thoughts on these things get hot and then that causes problems. I don't know if that's true or not. You know, I've talked to people that had the protectors, like what you guys saw me. I don't even know where I said it. Oh, I've had people to say that these things will get hot and cook wires, but I've only used them on one thing, I think, and that's the green truck when I put it together, but I've never had any issue. But I have seen pictures, and I don't know, I may shoot John a message and see what what his preference is, but man, this is not touching anywhere. So pretty good design here as far as the header goes. They actually fit just as good on the other side here. So moving on, I bought a new alternator because back when I had my B4C car, this car was down and the alternator went out on it. So I just robbed it off this because I wasn't going to be using it. But I knew I was going to upgrade to a higher amp alternator. And I believe, I'll list this in the description down below. I like that it's black, but I believe it's a 140, 180. They make a 2 something, which is what I put on the truck, but I didn't really think I needed much more than, 180s. That's quite a bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this thing in place. Not a whole lot to it, just 2 bolts. Actually 3 bolts. There's one that sneaks in from the backside. Get it in place here. And since the power steering pump's not in place, we'll be able to sneak our wire here. Remember, I said I'm going to take the harness out of the car. I'll see if I can find some torque specs for this. I don't think it's much, maybe 37. May not even be that much. Get it torqued down. Once we get those bolts in, 37 foot-pounds is what they're gonna go to. The back one is a 13. I'm not gonna put it to 37. I couldn't find a reliable torque spec on it. My guess is around 18. So that's what I'm gonna put it to. So we got 30. I need a new digital torque wrench, guys. And then, like I said, we'll put 18 on that 13 millimeter in the back. You could probably just snug it down. It's more of a brace than it is anything. As long as the bolt's in it and not gonna be loose, you should be good. All right, I lied to you guys. I decided that since I've got it out of the car and this isn't hooked to anything, I could go ahead and start putting on, I could put on the pump, the power steering pump. I've got it disconnected from the rack. I'm just looking at parts that are laying around that I could go ahead and put on. And I'm using that shaved down 15, like I said, because I don't have this off. You really need, in order to do this the correct way, you would have to have the pulley off and the reservoir off. But having one of these shaved down wrenches, I just bought a cheap wrench and shaved it down, gives you the ability to do it without doing all that. Kind of a tight fit, but and you know, I told you earlier about the being able to reach the plug for the alternator, but I'm gonna have room to do that as well. So we're gonna go ahead and snug these down. And this takes some time, just tightening this about a quarter turn at a time. And then as you tighten this one, then you tighten the other ones behind it. And you just get to a point where it draws up. And then you can torque it down to 37 foot-pounds. Obviously, I'm not gonna be able to get 37 on this back one. So I'm just gonna get it as tight as I can. So I figured, now that I've got this torqued down, tightened up, you know, why not go ahead and put the belt on? So just use that 15 here to swing that idler over and the belt's on. So cool thing about having it out of the car, like I said, is you have access to so much more stuff than you would normally have. At this point, I am at a spot where I actually need another part, and that part, guys, is the torque converter, which I have ordered, but it's about a 2 to 3 week lead time. Could possibly be a month depending on parts availability. So that's fine though. I don't want to rush this thing together. And really, I have some stuff to do off camera that I really don't want to have to show you guys. And that's me respraying those areas that I've been over. This area right here that I cut and bent, I want to paint those as well. So I've got some stuff to do off camera. Also, I'm going to go ahead and take this loose off the car because I want the harness hooked up to this thing when I roll it underneath. So there's a couple other parts that I'm missing as well. The injectors, which you guys will see the injectors that I chose and the torque converter that I chose in the next video. I want to clean up that transmission that I'm going to be putting in here as well. But we will be in the next video hopefully setting this on the K-member and then getting the transmission hooked up and the wiring harness hooked up and it actually ready to go back under the car, which will be an exciting point because this thing has been apart for way too long. I know you guys have been looking forward to this build, but just gotta wait for some more parts. So in the meantime, hopefully you guys are enjoying this. If you are, please, like always, smash that thumbs up button. If you guys are not subscribed, please go down there, hit that subscribe button. While you're down there, of course, ring that bell icon. That notifies you every single time we drop a new video, and stay tuned to see what we work on next.